Hi, this is Pat Iyer with Writing to Get Business. I am so pleased to bring you Amber Wynn today, who I met through a program that we are both involved in, designed to focus on setting up and maintaining membership sites. Amber has great expertise in the area of nonprofits, and I wanted to bring her on the show to talk about the approach that she took for writing her books, and she's got several books. Amber, welcome to the show.
Hi, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Give our listener a little bit of background of who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, I'm a nonprofit philanthropreneur. I have over 30 years experience in the nonprofit sector, and I've done everything from emptying the trash to giving out $7 million annually in grants. I've been an executive director, a programs administrator, a grant writer. My largest grant was for $3.2 million. My most recent grant was for $2.4 million. I sit currently on several boards. I've reviewed grants, but I do believe that in terms of insider information and insights, my most, important role has been as program officer for a funding organization, because I get to share those insights with my clientele, who happen to be founders and executive directors.
And you used a word to describe yourself, a philanthropreneur. Did I say that right?
Yes, that's right, a philanthropreneur. And it's a person who fuses the best of philanthropy, which is passion and concern for community, with the best practices of entrepreneurialism. Because nonprofits are businesses. People think, nonprofits are these glorified extensions of human beings, but they're businesses. They're just businesses with a philanthropic purpose. So I fuse the best of those to help founders and executive directors fund their nonprofits for long-term impact and sustainability.
I've heard speakers talk about nonprofits and presenting programs for nonprofits. And they said, don't be confused by the term nonprofit. Nonprofits have money, and they need to make money in order to operate. Has that been your experience from your involvement in this field for 30 years? That people are often confused about this?
It's one of the biggest myths that if I could get rid of, I would. Nonprofit does not mean no profit. You need money to pay for salaries, to pay for operations, to pay for programs. You need money to pivot so that you can meet the needs of the community. If I could change the title nonprofit, I would change it to for purpose. It's a for purpose organization. So it just takes away that misunderstanding that there's no profit. The monies just go back into the organization. They don't go into the individual's pocket like a for-profit does.
And yet, Amber, haven't there been stories about large nonprofits where the money did go into the director's pockets as opposed to the organization? It seems to me I've heard something about that.
Oh, absolutely. We have nefarious people in every sector. And I have, unfortunately...
Great way of putting it, Amber.
There are people who start nonprofits for the wrong reason, Pat. I won't say for the wrong reason. I'll say that they're misguided. For example, if you have a personal tragedy, it's the main reason why people start nonprofits. They feel like they want to do something to help people like themselves suffering. And it's a noble cause. It's just not a good reason to start a nonprofit. Likewise, you have people who, want to get around the infrastructure and think that they can use that for their own personal purposes, which is why the IRS has, rules about inurement. But it does. It happens all the time. It's unfortunate.
And I asked that question partly because I spent 28 years working with medical malpractice and personal injury attorneys.
There you go.
I was trained to always think about what can go wrong. People don't go to an attorney because they've had wonderful care and everything turned out well. That's the majority of people. I spent 28 years looking at the mistakes, the things that people do unconsciously or deliberately that end up resulting in injuring people. So that's my lens. So I don't mean to sound cynical. It's just the way that I've been looking at the world for a good portion of my professional career.
Listen, Pat, 40% of all nonprofits close their doors within 2 years. It's not because these amazing individuals don't have a heart. It's because they have absolutely no idea what they're stepping into. And as a result of what they don't know, they end up personally depleting their own personal accounts and just never, ever quite getting on track to running the organization the way the IRS had intended. So, yeah.
There's a lot of work for you there, Amber, to help people so that they don't end up with being part of the 40%.
Absolutely. And I'm committed to supporting my founders and executive directors. It's why I'm here.
You have all this experience, and I'm sure that it sometimes makes you want to tear out your hair when you see people going down the wrong path. Did any of that motivation play into your decision to write your first book?
Absolutely. You know, I was so frustrated back in 2013. I decided to provide free workshops. I was literally traveling across the country, providing free workshops because I wanted my nonprofit founders and executive directors to get accurate information. And what would happen, Pat, was they'd rush up to me at the end of my workshop and they're like, I want to work with you. I want to work with you. And I was just overwhelmed because of course it's just me. And so I was like, how can I, and we didn't have Zoom at the time. You know, I think we may have had go-to meetings, but I don't even know if those were really popular. And so I was just overwhelmed by the need that was out there. And so that's really what spurred my desire to get information out to the nonprofit sector.
Did you think about setting up a coaching program?
I did, but you know, when you coach, you can only coach one person. Well, not one person at a time, but you know, there's just a limit. There's only so many people that you can coach. And so it's just, you know, work-life balance and coaching is a challenge.
It is if you have a lot of individuals. I have heard of a strong trend in coaches to do more group coaching because they max out on individual sessions.
Yeah. And it's depleting. It's depleting because, especially in the nonprofit sector, most founders start their nonprofits in the middle of the process. So that means I can't necessarily coach you. Like, we've got to rebuild the organization, and it just takes a lot.
So it's more than working on mindset and marketing.
Absolutely. In order for nonprofits to qualify for money, if you get your tax exempt status, you're eligible, right? But to qualify, the infrastructure has to be in place. You have to have a working board. It can't be your friends and family and college, you know, roommate, because that impacts. You have to have, you know, your website, and then, you know, accounting systems and processes. There's just so much that you need to have in order to qualify for funding, and it just becomes exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think you're describing good intentioned people, if I can characterize them as wanting to make a difference, and yet stumbling into a model that is complex.
Yeah.
Probably and without adequate guidance.
Absolutely. If I could put a moratorium on nonprofits being established, I would. There's no new problem out there. You know, there's just different ways to tackle old problems. And if people who are seriously committed to making a change in this world would just partner with other nonprofits, I believe we could actually make some progress, because people have innovative ideas, but there's only a small pot of money. So you keep bringing more and more nonprofits. Now you have this competition, and it's just like, where does the money go? And really well-intentioned people, but you know, they don't do the type of research that they would do starting a for-profit, because they've been led to believe it's easy. You know, get your 501c3 tax exempt status, and then you get these grants, and that's just not how it works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Returning to your book, You started in, I guess it was in 2013, when you were going across the country. People were asking for more guidance. You recognized there was a limit to the number of people you could help. What was your vision in terms of that first publication?
It was to give founders and nonprofit executive directors information in a very down-to-earth, real way. Because a lot of the books out there on how to, start a nonprofit, how to write a grant, they're very, to me, elevated. And the founders and executive directors that I work with were really grassroots and just wanted to hear the truth. And so I wanted to put it in my voice, because that's how I delivered my workshops. I gave examples and analogies that used everyday examples. And I wanted it to be in consumable chunks. So that's why I made them 50, 60 pages or less. And I wanted it so that they could just pick it up and let it be an easy read, but in a way that they understood. Mm-hmm. A lot of these books, they write as if people have knowledge about the purpose of a nonprofit. A nonprofit fills the gap between government and private industry. And so I talk about that. What's the purpose? Nonprofits do what government and private agencies don't want to do. And so having that understanding, and then understanding how funding works, I just really wanted it to be, you understand that this is not your nonprofit. You can't own a nonprofit. A nonprofit is a public charity. Like, a lot of people don't realize that. Oh, I started my nonprofit. It's not yours. Mm-hmm.
And you said something that sparked another thought a few minutes ago about putting the book in consumable chunks. There was a study that I saw on my Smart News app, which said that when people analyzed writing as this experiment, they took simple sentences and substituted those words in the sentences for words that were more complex with more syllables. And then they asked readers to make a decision about how intelligible was the writing. They found that the people who read the complex sentences and complex words thought the writer was actually less intelligent.
Really?
They got more from the simpler sentences, probably because they could understand them. And it sounds to me like what you've done in your writing is to think about how much information your audience had and how you could simplify what is a complex subject.
Right. I think for me, a lot of the books that I've read, I've worked in the academic arena. And so, when you have a PhD behind your name, you write like an academic. And so I didn't have those pressures. My purpose was to strengthen communities, really. And I felt like if I wrote a book, I could get it out to more nonprofit leaders who needed the information. And so I didn't feel compelled to impress anyone. Mm-hmm. And so I just put it in simple language, because the purpose is to help the founder. And if you have to go get a thesaurus to understand what it is that I'm talking about, then you're going to put the book down. And that wasn't my goal. It wasn't my purpose. So
that's a key point. And I have not had a podcast in which we've talked about the difference between academic writing and, I don't know what the right adjective is. Whether
it's just lay terms, right? Lay.
Every day.
Yes.
Lay
right.
people talk.
Yep.
I've edited some textbooks for legal nurse consultants, and I can think of a couple of authors who came from academia who wanted to footnote every other word in their sentences or every other sentence. And it became so ponderous and difficult to read because you're constantly getting interrupted. The flow is constantly being broken up.
It's one of the reasons why I've been very successful as a grant writer. And And when I was working with Cal State Fullerton, we had a program called Funding My Research. And we really had to change the mindset of academics, because I told them this is not academic writing. Academic writing, the purpose is to inform, but the purpose of grant writing is to persuade. And so we don't need to prove every little thing. And it takes a while. It took us literally about 6 months to shift our faculty from academic writing to what I call sexy writing. It has to be sexy. You're competing against other, programs and services. And so I've been a panel reviewer. You read the same thing over and over. You want something that's going to excite the reviewer. You want something that's going to make them sit up and say, now this is sexy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, it's a complete difference in the way that you write for academia. Like I would say, what are you going to do? What's the measurable outcome? Because academics will say, we're going to look at, no. As a funder, I want to know, what change are you going to make? And so it's a difference, because they're not comfortable with saying this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point, because our perspective and the lens with which we see the world is so influenced by the people around us, the objectives of what we're trying to accomplish, our audience. We do get trained in writing a certain way.
Yeah, it's the biggest challenge for academics. But those who get it, I find it's like having, it's like being bilingual. You know how to write academically, but you also know how to write persuasively. And they are just two different things.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned 50 or 60 pages. I wanted to return to that.
Okay.
What format did you use for delivering that first book?
You mean in terms of was it
printed?
Demand?
Was it digital?
So I actually was looking for, I'd never written a book before. So there was this program out there called AK Mastery. It was this guy who just produced a mass number of ebooks, and his purpose was to make money, just passive income. I think it's AK Mastery. I wasn't interested in becoming a billionaire. I was interested in what is the format for an ebook. And so I just leveraged his format, and it was perfect. It had the table of contents, it had the chapters, everything that you needed. And so that's what I did. I leveraged his infrastructure, introduction, I think it's like 6 chapters, conclusion, and then at the end, you give a list of what's coming up, Mm-hmm. And I'm like, perfect. I was an English major, so writing was never the issue. It was really just about making sure that I had a format that worked for me, and that one worked.
Mm-hmm. I have seen some well-formatted ebooks, and I have seen some private label rights, PLR ebooks that have been written by probably people in other countries, or even by computers. I'm convinced some of them have been created by computers and no human eyes have ever looked at them.
No, it's true. One of his methods was, you don't even have to write the book. You just, pick out the topic, and, there are sites out there where they pay people to write it, and you can tell they're not comfortable with, or they don't have mastery of the idioms and nuances. And English, it's such a bastard language. We steal from this and steal from that sometimes there's just no rhyme or reason. Mm-hmm. And you can tell in the writing. And so again, that wasn't my goal. My goal wasn't to get out 15, ebooks and have them make money for me. It was really to get my information out in a way that was helpful for my, target audience. I just needed the structure.
Mm-hmm. And there are some beautifully formatted ebooks that I have seen that just have that designer touch that make them so visually appealing, which I think is another whole element to think about, is the cover, the layout. Are there going to be numbers that are put in the page in a particular way? Is there going to be a swoop of color or wrap around text around pictures? There's just so many ways that you can make it look appealing and more consumable.
When I started out, Pat, Amazon didn't have any of those resources.
Oh,
so I literally, I got on Fiverr and I was looking for someone who could do my cover. I was looking for someone because I wrote it in Word, but at the time they only had EPUB. So I had to pay someone to translate it from Word into EPUB. It was just a hot mess. Mm-hmm. Now, Amazon has it so where you can develop your own cover. They have templates now, you just drop in the text and it's automatically converted. They have a system where you can check to make sure the layout is perfect. It's so much easier now. I'm like, look at that.
It is.
But back in 2013, I had to piecemeal it together.
And at that point, the Kindle was separate from CreateSpace.
Exactly.
Even though they were both under the Amazon umbrella, now they are combined under Kindle Direct Publishing. And then if you want to format a ebook for a Nook or for
totally
an
different,
iBook,
yep,
it's different software.
Yep.
There's no uniformity in terms of the platforms.
Absolutely. So it was a labor of love because I was committed to getting the information out there. But at the time, there was no, how to do it. I just kind of stumbled through it. I would say it was kind of wonky, kind of funky. I was committed to getting the information out. So.
Mm-hmm. And then what happened next in terms of marketing this ebook?
So my business model, for lack of a better explanation, it just took so many turns that, it became, my ebooks became secondary to what I was doing. I'm not, I'm an author. I have fiction, and then I have my, professional books, but it's never been what I used to catapult me.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of marketing, it takes a lot of work to get your stuff out there, right? And I just didn't have the desire, Pat, to make that the forefront. I did read, though, that if you want to become an expert, the one thing you must have is a book for sale at the back of the room. And so I was like, oh, okay, if ever I decide to do a speaking circuit, which I thought about, I'll have something already that I can then get polished and, have a publisher look at and make sure, it's of quality. Because that wasn't my focus. It was just to get the information out. So I never really put into it the marketing. When I have speaking engagements, I do promote it and I let people know, well, you can get the ebook. When I do workshops, I just recently did a 3-hour workshop on the budget narrative, and I'll let people know, well, if you want information on this topic, just go to Amazon as print on demand, or you can, get it via Kindle as an ebook, but it's more of a support and not a standalone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many ebooks do you have now?
I have 4. It's called Nonprofit Management in a Box. One is How to Start a Nonprofit. Another one is Why Nonprofits Fail. The third is the Nonprofit Board of Directors. And the fourth is Developing the Nonprofit Infrastructure. I have 13 in the series in terms of in my head, but I've only published 4 of the 13.
It sounds to me like if you wanted to, you could make a physical book from the combined information from just those 4.
Absolutely. And that's what most people do. They cover the whole gamut in a book, like a huge book. But again, I just wanted to make it small, bite-sized, chunks. Mm-hmm. But these are the topics that if I were to, write a book from the perspective of a nonprofit veteran, it would include all of these topics and all of the other 13, because it's funding, networking, donor cultivation. It's just a ton of them. And I just decided to pull them out and to make them into small ebooks so that they would be easily digestible. You're absolutely right.
It sounds to me like you started this process in 2013, and we're recording this in 2020. Do you have a goal in terms of when you want to finish the series?
Yeah, it would be nice if I can do it now. I mean, we are in a pandemic, and I know, but listen, I have so many nonprofits in my queue to help, because with the pandemic, they can't provide direct services like they were used to doing. And so now everything's moved online, but because they don't have the infrastructure, it's going to be a challenge for them to get the funding that they need. And so they need the information now, how to fund your nonprofit. The way I approach funding is slightly different because I have the different perspectives, right? Mm-hmm. So I can tell a person the reason why your website needs to be amazing is because right now funders can't come and do site visits. So if your website is brighthorizons.com, that .com is a red flag. It needs to be .org, and so it's just a lot. And right now, because I'm busy literally working with nonprofits to help them transition, I just don't have the time. Mm-hmm. But ideally right now would be perfect, because my nonprofit founders who've been making it happen because they've been in the community, they need to figure out how to transition. And I think that information would be very helpful.
Yeah, you're bringing up some points that I hadn't even considered in terms of fundraising for nonprofits. They cannot have the big gala event.
They can't. They can't. And a lot of them, because they did direct services, and because either it was a gala or a run walk, or but they're in-person types of fundraising, and they can't do it right now. And so many of them won't survive this pandemic. It just breaks my heart. So they've got to look at new ways of fundraising. But it all comes back to, especially in my book, Why Nonprofits Fail, not having the infrastructure. So funders are being bombarded with requests. And so how do they determine which agencies they're going to fund? They're going to fund the ones that give them the best return on their investment. Those are the ones who have infrastructure. Those are the ones who can meet the criteria that the funding agency is looking for. And unfortunately, when we talk about social justice issues, a lot of these grassroots organizations, they run off of passion and commitment, and they don't have the infrastructure that they need so that they can be competitive for these funds.
It's really a profession, as you're describing it, with values, underpinnings, experiences, strategies, processes.
It's a business. Aren't you describing a business? And so when I tell my people, nonprofits are businesses. They require marketing, they require accounting, they require human resource management. All of the things that a for-profit business requires, a nonprofit requires. And so, people who don't really have those skill sets are running organizations. And so it's just a challenge a lot of the time. But you're absolutely right.
And there are a lot of small businesses that go out of business for exactly those same reasons.
The same reason, yeah.
In fact, in my Smart News app, you can tell I've become a little obsessed with following the news, which started in about February. But I read a statistic that something like 160,000 businesses are never going to reopen.
Never. And I don't know if they count nonprofits in those businesses, but I can tell you it's going to be a huge number of nonprofits that won't recover.
Yeah, there are so many aspects of this, aren't there? I always think about the restaurant industry, which was risky prior to this.
To begin with, yes. They have another 2-year lifespan. If they can make it past 2 years, they're usually okay. But they're another entity that usually won't make it past 2 years.
Somebody approached us. My husband is Indian, and we were in an Indian restaurant one time, and the owner came over and started talking about how he wanted to sell his Indian restaurant and retire to Florida. And he said to my husband, your wife sold her business. How did that happen? So we talked to him about our business broker, who was instrumental in helping us find buyers and then helping us narrow it down and negotiate until we found the company who bought my business. So I said to my business broker, hey, here's this Indian restaurant. They do good business. He says, we don't represent restaurants. They are way too high risk. We don't try to sell them. No. Other businesses, Pat, just keep coming them. I'd like the referrals.
But not those.
Not restaurants,
Ooh.
no. So now I have another category of high risk, nonprofits and restaurants.
Nonprofits, yeah. It's so unfortunate, yeah. And they both feed the soul.
In different ways, don't they?
Yeah.
And we need people who do have that motivation to feed the soul, who are wanting to do good, and it's not all about generating income, selling whatever they want. It's about making a difference in the lives of people in the community or people who have specific needs or interests.
I've been doing Facebook Lives, and I'll just admit I hate technology. I'm Generation X, and it just sometimes just... But I've been doing Facebook Lives, Pat, because the world needs nonprofits right now. To your point, this is the time when we should be shining. This is the time when we step up and do what it is that we do best. And so I've been sharing just my insights from a funder's perspective, from a reviewer's perspective, to try and, help as many nonprofits as possible to understand it's not just about having a 501c3 tax exempt status. It's about the infrastructure. It's about looking the part. It's about standing out and outshining your competitors. People go into this thinking, I get my 501c3 tax exempt status and the grants are going to start just falling in. People have been doing the same thing that you're doing for 10 to 15 years, and they have a track record and they have measurable outcomes, and you have a concept. So who's going to get funded? Mm-hmm. So I think it's just important at this time in history that our nonprofits understand that they've got to look up from the weeds because they've been working in the communities doing the work. And if they're going to survive, they've got to build their infrastructure and make it so where that they are an organization worth investing in. Grants are not free money. They are an investment from a funding agency. And so they want to partner with the best organization. And so I'm just trying to put out the information so our founders and executive directors understand that.
You have real passion for this, Amber.
I know for a fact, not only because I've been a deliverer, but I've been a recipient. I'm from an underserved community, and a lot of my exposure came from nonprofits. My mom was a single mom, and she just didn't have it. And so I know firsthand the value of a nonprofit. And having been an executive director, I was executive director of Girls Inc. of Los Angeles, and just having my girls, we took them up to Humboldt, and when we came back, half of them decided they wanted to be math majors. We took them to a flight to New York. A lot of them hadn't even been outside of their community. And next thing you know, they're protesting. They're standing up for, women's rights. And so I know the impact of nonprofits. I know what we do. And so I am passionate about it. But I also know, Pat, that nonprofit founders and executive directors get burned out. They don't have cheerleaders. They don't have people, coaching them. Everyone needs a coach. And so I try and stand in that space. I'm mighty, but I'm only one person. So I use my books. I use my website. I use whatever I can to try and support these amazing people, because they are just amazing people.
I know that somebody who's listening to this is going to want to connect with you, get copies of your ebooks, find out more about what you can offer. What would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, the books are on Amazon. So just, go to Amazon Books, and you can find me at Amber, Amber, Wynn. And the series is called Nonprofit Management in a Box. But if they want to contact me personally, my website is amberwynn.net, AMBERWYNN.net.
.net. Okay, yes. Perfect. Amber, thank you so much for sharing your passion with us, for talking about this world that means so much to you and means so much to the people whose lives are touched by the strategies and the processes and the techniques that nonprofits offer. I think you've shared,
Pat, thank you.
The complexity.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I'm always excited to talk about the nonprofit sector and the challenges, because I'm here to support my community. So I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be on your platform and to share my knowledge.
Well, thank you, Amber. And thank you to you who's listening to this program. You've shared the last 30 minutes of your life with us. I hope it will inspire you, give you some different perceptions about nonprofits that you might not have had before, how important they are, how much commitment and passion and business processes go into running a nonprofit. And if you have an interest in this world, be sure to check out Amber Wynn's books. That's Amber, last name spelled Wynn, and her website is amberwynn.net. You can get her books on Amazon. They are ebooks, and at some point you can expect to see more books from Amber Wynn when it fits in with all the other aspects of her life that she's dealing with. Thanks so much.